Okay, we are now recording, and one of the reasons we're recording is because there is no way on earth someone could teach you how to make maps in a 40-minute session. They're complicated. There's a lot to it, but Katie's going to give you a kind of a walkthrough, so you'll have seen what needs to happen before when you get to this project later on, if you choose to. And we also have kind of a step-by-step walkthrough on our website that has it in writing for those of you who are better dealing with it that way. And then you'll also have a recording of this webinar to go back and put the two things together. So when you get there, there will be more help available. And you also, as we're going to recommend throughout this, for the nuts and bolts of this, the creating your initial base map, you're probably going to want to work with somebody who already knows GIS and what they're doing in any case. It can be done from scratch by a novice, and we're going to try to give you the tools to do that if you need to, but it's not easy. It will be painful. So working with somebody who knows what they're doing is a good start. Why are we doing this? Quickly, this comes out of a grant project that we're just finishing to create a wildfire protection plan for the community of Hopland. And when we talked to the Hopland Fire Chief, one of his top priorities was getting good first responder community maps as out of that project to be part of the plan. And he referred us to the Anderson Valley Fire Chief, and both of them had sort of encountered these maps when they were in Southern California working fire projects. And what happens in large fires is crews get pulled in from everywhere. What they discovered that they thought was tremendously useful in some communities in Southern California was when they pulled up to a road leading to a community that was unknown. They had a Knox box with a combination that they could open and a map that they could pull out that was specifically designed for first responders, that not only had the road layout, but shows the footprints of the buildings down that road, how they're laid, so you know which roads have more buildings, that points out any particularly precious resources that need to be defended, that shows where turnarounds are, that shows where water is available, that points out any other things that particular community thought first responders should know coming into an unknown area. So we're kind of picking up on that. It's a project that started in Anderson Valley. The fire chief there went and worked with some locals and did the project and got some maps. The Elk Fire Department saw it and loved it and applied for a grant and did it for Elk. We talked to Hopland, and he had seen those and wanted it done as well. So we went and got a little help from the Community Foundation for this project, so that we could not only deliver the maps for the Hopland thing, but do as thorough a process as possible of documenting how to do it, so that other communities throughout Mendocino could pick up and replicate this process without starting from scratch. So we've got that on the website. That's why we're here today, just to show you what that process is. And I want to turn it over to Katie to start walking you through how it works.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Yeah, so I'm Katie Smith. I am the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council's Grizzly Corps member, which is an AmeriCorps program that focuses on rural climate action. So that's a little bit about me. And I guess I'll start with the disclaimer that I'm not a GIS professional. I am passable and am gaining knowledge as I go. So I'll try and answer as many questions as I can. But if it gets too technical, I might have to get back to you with an answer. So just to give you a little bit of a layout of what we're going to do tonight before we start, my game plan is to share with you a brief presentation of just the basic overview of making these maps, the process, like Scott said, and then the real bulk of the night is going to be 2 screen share demonstrations, one of ArcGIS Pro, which we have been using to make these maps, and we'll do a quick presentation of what goes into making the base maps. And then the second will be Avenza Maps, which is an app that you can get on your phone for volunteers to collect data digitally. So with that, I will start my screen share here. And like Scott said, I really do want to emphasize that this isn't going to be a comprehensive overview of creating these maps. It takes a lot of time and a lot of troubleshooting if you're not super comfortable. So if you get lost in any of the demonstrations, please do not worry about it. The purpose really is to show you all the elements that go into these maps and kind of the process of creating them, not to teach you step by step how to make them. So, and also I just will say, since it's a pretty small group, feel free to raise your hand, put questions in the chat as we go. I'll try and answer them. And I think Scott's going to try and monitor that for me as we go. And then there should be time at the end too. So to start with the process here, oops, there we go. Yeah, so the real purpose of these maps is to communicate local knowledge to folks coming in from out of town during a crisis. So these maps really, they look different for every community because they are based on the unique issues of your neighborhood. The purpose of these is to communicate that efficiently and effectively. So there's a number of different types of data and different layers that you'll want to include, and that's what we're going to talk about in bulk tonight. So the first step to doing these maps is to assemble a mapping team. And, you know, there's a lot of different mapping softwares out there. We have used kind of the ArcGIS suite just because that's what we have access to and what the folks we've been working with, including myself, are most familiar with. But there are other options out there. But yeah, you'll see a demonstration tonight of ArcGIS Pro. And we'll mention again that these software they are expensive and they can be tricky to learn. So the best thing is if you can kind of coerce someone from your community that might have a bit of experience and access to these to be your mapping team, that is a really great resource that you'll have. But if not, it might even be beneficial to hire someone for a couple of hours to create these base maps because they are they're pretty easy once you're familiar with GIS.
And to chip in there too, just quickly, we will also, the Fire Safe Council will have a copy of ArcGIS Pro that you can bum if the expense of the Pro is the issue for your group.
Yes. And I see Eric has his hand raised. So if you want to take yourself off mute, you are welcome to.
Katie, thanks. That Scott knew where I was going probably when he saw the hand go up because I'd asked about that before. I guess the follow up to that, which I think that's ideal if the county Fire Safe Council can provide that shared license for all the Fire Safe Councils, that would be great. Have we talked about doing a standardized process so that all the maps, like the icons and everything, are the same across the board for everybody? Yeah. Everybody's got their own unique requirements for their neighborhood, but are we doing the standardized process? Did we get there?
Yeah, so there is some standard stuff of just kind of the real basics that we'll talk through the priorities, I guess, of data collection. And those are going to have a standardized look, like keeping your water sources blue and things like that. And there's a couple other that we have, and those are up on our website on that page. But the more like nitty gritty stuff is going to be really unique to every neighborhood, might look a little different, but we'll try and keep that major framework.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so for the data sourcing, there's 5 kind of key layers that you're going to include on your base map that every base map is going to include, and we'll talk those through tonight. But the 5 layers are roads, parcels, address points, streams and water bodies, and building footprints. And all of this data is available for free online or from the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council. Those first 3 layers that you see up there, we purchased from the county, and then we have permission to share with folks making these maps. And then the remaining 2 layers are available online from ArcGIS Online, and you don't need any type of license or account in order to access those. You can just go onto the internet and find those. So once you have all this data at your fingertips, either download it onto your local device or know where you can access it online, the next step is to create your base map. This is the demonstration we'll see tonight, so I won't really spend time here, but this is just a process of visualizing that data in a way that is quickly digestible to people coming into your community. So the next step and kind of the bulk of this process, the thing that makes these maps really valuable is your volunteer enlisting. So the type of data and the amount of data that you're able to collect onto these maps is pretty dependent on the number of volunteers you have and the type of time they're able to devote to this, because it can be a pretty time-consuming process if you really get down into the nitty-gritty. So because of that, we have created a training document that is available on our website as well, that has a bit more information about all of this type of data that you might collect, and it's prioritized in ranked order, so that if you have less time, you'll kind of hit the first marks first, the most important features first, and then you can go down the list with more time. So for roads, things like the presence or absence of roads on a map versus if they exist or not, or if they no longer exist but are still represented on the map, that's really important, as well as things like roads that are only accessible in fair weather, roads that might have gates, or where turnaround points are on roads. That's all important information. Addresses and residence locations, where you want to make sure that the address house numbers match what exists in real life and match those reflective address lines that we really recommend everyone has out in front of their driveways. And if they don't match, that's something to note and to send back to your mapping team. And residence locations as well. We do know that the Microsoft layer that we use has some faults, and it doesn't always capture all of the residence footprints that actually exist. So if your house is missing, that's an important one to note. Water sources, this can be things, pools, ponds, or catchment tanks, anything that a firefighter might be able to pump from in an emergency. And then a little bit of extra information like the capacity and the size of attachment are important to note if you know those informations. Eric, I see your hand go up. Sorry, it's hard for me to see the chat, but I can see hands, so.
No, that as far as number 2, the residence locations, what's the recommendation? Is it just the house, or do they want to know, would they want to know all properties, barns, other shops, stuff like that?
Yeah, so the real kind of purpose of this is to get a sense of density. So, you know, at a glance, you're able to look down a road and see if there's 2 houses down there or 2 structures that might need defending, or if it's a pretty dense area. So definitely including those non-residence locations is important, because they can be protected if there's the time and resources. So I would say err on the side of putting things on there, but you know, you don't need to put on every shed and things like that. Okay, so should we use a different icon for a home versus a shop, etc.? I lean towards no. I mean, that might be a question that we could pass along towards folks that are actually using these maps, but my sense is to say that to busy the field like that might make it a little bit harder to interpret on the fly, and just keeping it with the major buildings as one icon would be my sense.
Okay,
Yep,
makes sense.
Okay, the rest are fairly self-explanatory. Hydrants and standpipes, obviously those are important to note. Key infrastructure, and this is the type of thing that can be pretty granular just depending on your community. So things like cell towers, or you know, a school or something like that that you might have can show up in that. But then more unique things like maybe an elderly couple that might need help evacuating, or you know, a family that doesn't have a car that also might need help, things like that can be noted in that key infrastructure in that kind of box. Storage of toxic substances, pretty self-explanatory. And then finally, bridges on private roads. This is where you just might want to note the weight capacity, because generally firefighters will not attempt to cross bridges without a known weight capacity.
Cool.
Yeah, I
Let me
see.
jump in real quick. So we had a note in the chat from a fire chief with a super good point that we should build into the thing, which is that a great idea to touch base with your local fire department when you're doing these, to see if there are any particular things they want coded, and you know, get a sense of what in terms of including extra buildings and things, you know, get a sense of what they think is defensible. Ask them a couple of questions. It ideally is a partnership with the folks you're working with locally.
Yeah,
Because like you said, you don't want to.
Well, Jason, and you may be able to answer this. What Katie brought up is a good point. Is what's the point of it? Are they looking for where people might be so they know where to go if they're looking to save lives, or are they trying to figure out density? Because if they're figuring out density, you only want to have residences. If they're trying to save all structures and want to know where the structures are in your land, that's different. So it kind of depends on how they're going to be using the information. So that makes it a little.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's actually, unfortunately, it's complex and it depends on the situation. There's going to be days that you want to see every building because, as Katie said, if the resources are there, we're going to save every structure that we can. However, if it's in that the fire is blowing through really rapidly and we're just in an evacuation mode, then it's nice to be able to see the primary residences specifically where you would find those personnel to assist with the evacuations.
So maybe talk with them, but maybe it sounds like 2 icons, one for residents and one for other type of building would be good, regardless of what the other type of building is. So at least they know where to go to save lives and evacuate versus structural protection in general.
Yeah, that's kind of where
That's what I would do.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I would do for my fire district.
And I'm gonna, at this point, we've got a fairly well-timed thing here with about 10 minutes for questions at the end, but we're getting a lot more questions along the way this time. So I'm gonna ask that people keep the questions at this point to sort of super short things that are really relevant to the moment, and we'll come back around at the end, but I want to make sure we get through everything for all the folks on the line to get the whole presentation first.
Got it.
We can hang out and do questions longer for people who want to ask more detailed questions.
Absolutely. And if you have a question about like the process, it's definitely still feel free to jump in, but kind of those broader stuff we can get back to. And the only thing I was going to add about that is that one drawback, I guess, of using this open source data layer. So the Microsoft building footprints that we use to do the initial representation of this doesn't differentiate between residences and outbuildings or anything else like that. So things that volunteers add to the map, you can definitely differentiate between, but when it comes to the initial base map, that's not really something that you're able to represent, I guess. Just final comment on that. So moving on, there's a couple different ways to collect data. The first being the old-fashioned printed out and use colored pens, markers, whatever you have to gather that data. And the second being what we're going to talk about in the second half of this presentation, using software to collect data digitally. And the benefit of that is when you go to incorporate this volunteer information, it makes it super quick and easy. If you already have it in a digital form, it is a really simple step to integrate that into your base map and make that final representation. And then kind of the final thing to think about as a community when you're starting to make these maps is coming up with a cyclical time to review these maps and make sure they're still up to date and add or subtract things as needed. So it's important to put the date of the last approval on there so that you can come back to it and it will be a living document. And then finally, publishing maps, like we talked about, it's important to get these to your local fire department, but then having a Knox box or similar lockbox is important for people coming in from out of town to access these on the fly. And similar to that, we're suggesting that people include a QR code similar to this one here. And that can link straight to a geo-reference PDF that is hosted on the Mendocino County Fire Safe website. And that just allows first responders to come in, scan that with a smartphone, and then it uses their GPS location to track them as they're responding. So it'll follow their path and let them easily orient. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the GIS portion of this. So hopefully you are seeing my GIS now. This is kind of what it looks like when you open up a map and you get started.
We're still on the slideshow.
Oh, we are. Uh-oh. Okay. Sorry. Let me stop my share and restart my share. All right. How about now?
There we go.
Beautiful. Sorry about that. Yep, this is what it looks like when you open up GIS Pro. And before I even start a map, there are kind of two time-saving tips that I like to do before I start adding data to any map. The first is setting a bookmark. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in on our location here. For the purpose of tonight, we're going to look at this Felice Creek Road neighborhood over here in Western Hopland. And in order to set a bookmark, you're going to center your map frame around what you are hoping to visualize. So now that we have that in our map frame, I'm going to come up to this bookmarks button. I'll click the drop down and I'll do add new bookmark. And then I can name this with anything recognizable. And I'll hit save. And the purpose of that is sometimes when you're adding data to a map, it'll quickly fly you over and you'll end up somewhere where you have no idea where you are or how to get home. And using this bookmark, you just come back, click your drop down, and then choose that option that we just created. And it zooms you back in on where you're trying to see. And that will just save you time in the long run when you're using mapping software like this. And the second thing that I wanted to point out before we get started is choosing your base map. So the base map is what we're looking at right now. It's this imagery, and right now I have it on a topographic base map so you can kind of see the mountains and stuff like that. But if you come up to the base map button and again, choose the drop down, it'll pull up a number of options. And these all kind of have different benefits depending on your priorities for your map. And the amazing thing is that you can toggle between base maps and it doesn't change how your data is visualized on your map. So a lot of times I'll switch between a couple as I'm making a map in order to have the benefits of one in a certain time. So I'm going to choose the hybrid imagery right now, which will bring up a satellite imagery along with some human infrastructure. So once I have kind of my map set up how I want it, the next step is to start adding data. And the first thing you need to do is tell the software where it's going to look for that data. So to do so, I'm going to come up to this insert button up here and then hit add folder. And from there, it takes you to this inside view of your computer kind of thing. And you're going to go ahead and navigate to wherever you saved that data that we talked about before. So for me, it's in this example map data. And once that is selected, I'll hit OK. It's kind of disconcerting sometimes because you'll see that nothing happens when I do that. But now the software knows where it can go look and it won't break a connection while looking for that data. So the next step is to actually add data to the map. So we'll come back over to the map tab. We'll go to this add data button, click the drop down. Again, a lot of different options come up. The two that I use most often and that we use for these types of maps is the add data to the map and the add data from path. So the difference here is that adding data, this is just to add data that is stored locally on the hard drive, the computer you're using. Add data from path allows you to use a URL to add data from the web really quickly. So I'll just show you if I click on this, add data, it takes me into the example map data folder that we looked at previously. And these are all the different file types that are compatible with GIS that I have saved in there. So if I were to select one, I could hit OK and it would show up on the map. Just for the sake of time, I've already added all of them to the map. So the reason you can't see them is because you can see these little check boxes over here are not turned on. So I'll go ahead and start turning them on so we can see our data. So I wanted to turn on the water bodies first, and you can see it represented by this little blue, light blue, thin light blue line. And the reason I turned this on first was to show two different things. The first being one of the reasons why I like to turn on the satellite imagery initially. You can see that we can see Felice Creek here, but this layer doesn't capture any of these ponds we can see dotted throughout the landscape. So if I was actually making this map in real time, it would be really important to use the edit button, the edit feature, in order to digitize these ponds. And basically you do that by just drawing around the perimeter and then it's included in the water body feature. I don't have the time to do that right now, but I just want to point that out. And the second thing is because there's kind of a cool learning opportunity here that I discovered while I was making this. This layer, these water bodies layer comes from USGS, and it's, USGS is generally a really valuable source of data. They produce really high quality data, but you can see that there's actually a mistake here in this data set. Felice Creek definitely doesn't go up and over this mountain like that. And knowing that, we would want to edit the path of the creek in order to follow what really exists. And as a volunteer, if you were to receive this map and you saw Felice Creek take this kind of left-hand turn here, you would want to note that on your map and say this is not where Felice Creek goes, so that your mapping team can go back and digitize it into what really exists. So that's just kind of a unique opportunity that we had there. So I'll use bookmarks to zoom back out, and then I'll go ahead and turn on the rest of our layers. Okay, so the first thing I do when I add data to a map is I like to change the name of the layer over in the contents pane over here. So to do that, you just do a slow double click like you might in any file, and then you can go ahead and rename it to something that's quickly legible. And the reason you do that is not only for yourself, just to make it easier to navigate around your map, but when we go to make a layout, the layout pulls a key or a legend directly from the layers that you have turned on in your map pane. So if it's named something really weird like it was before, it's a lot harder to quickly interpret your map. So you just want to make sure everything's labeled quite nicely. So now that we have that done, the next step is to change the symbology. And symbology is just the fancy word for how it's represented on the map. So I left parcels in this strange symbology that it uploaded with. And now we're going to change it. So to do so, you click this little arrow, you bring down a drop down, and I'll click on the symbology. And it'll bring up my symbology pane over here. I'll choose properties. And then you can see that I can change, I want to be able to see the base map. So I'm going to make the fill color no color, and I'm going to change the outline to red because that's the standard that we have set. And I'm going to set it to 1 point width. And then you can notice that it changes down here, but nothing happens on my map until I press apply. And then once that's done, it occurs on the map. So the next one I'll show is address points. So you can see right now, address points are showing up as these little red dots, which is not really very helpful because it's just correlated to a separate parcel or residence. But we really want to be able to see the number. So to do that, I'm going to again click this drop down. And in order to get rid of this kind of distracting red dot, I'll open up the symbology pane. I'm going to set it to black, and I'm just going to turn the outline size down quite small. And then I'll say apply. And then in order to get the label, we're looking for the house number label. So I'll right click here, and I'm just going to go ahead and turn on labels. And then you can see that the numbers of the associated house show up. So the final thing you might notice about this is it's now really hard to read because I have that satellite imagery on. So this is when I go ahead and change my base map back into one of these planar backgrounds. Any of these kind of gray ones work well. I like to use the topographic one because it's important to see those features. So with that, we have visualized all the data that we have. Oh, actually, you can see that roads are kind of this beige line that is hard to see. And our standard for roads is this minor road visualization. So I'll change that. I apologize, I hadn't done that before. But with that, you can see that we visualized all our data in the standard. And so our next step is going to be to create a layout. And a layout is just the fully legible version of a map that someone might be able to pick up and read. And the way that we do that is we come over to this insert button again, and we're going to choose the add new layout, click the drop down. It'll bring up a lot of options. And of course, when you're making these for real, it is beneficial to use some of these bigger sizes sometimes. But for the purpose of today, I'm just going to use the standard letter size. And it brings up this blank piece of paper. So the first thing I always do when I open a new layout is create a map frame. So that's this button up here that says map frame. Again, you can choose the drop down and it gives you some options. Picking this one in the middle that has a preset ratio will give you the view that you left in your map frame. So this is the one that I always like to choose. And then you can just go ahead and draw a rectangle on your piece of paper in the space that is going to be filled. And you can see that the view that we were just looking at auto populates into that square. So from there are 5 other elements in a map layout that you're always going to want to include, being a title, the date, a north arrow, a scale bar, and a legend. So I'm just going to put those on, show you how to put those on really quick, and then we'll get into the events portion of the night. So this up here in this graphics and text pane is where you're going to find your text box. So you can choose rectangle text. Again, you just draw your text box, and then you can go ahead and name it something quickly identifiable. So I'm going to name it Fleece Creek Road, Western. And then you can use the normal, if you come up to this formatting pane, it looks quite similar to other, once it loads, to some other software that you might have used, like Microsoft Suite and things like that. But you can use this to change the way it's formatted, so you know it is an actual title. I'll come back over to this insert tab since I got out of it. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a north arrow. To do so, you can choose the drop down. There's a lot of different options. This is the one I like to use. Again, I'll draw that in there on the map. And the same with the scale bar, many options. I'm going to choose just one and I'll draw that on. And the very cool thing about the north arrow and the scale bar and the legend, they're all auto-referenced to your map. So if you were to change your orientation so that north is no longer facing up, the north arrow will automatically point the correct direction, and the scale is automatically correct to the map. You don't have to do anything to set that scale, which is handy. So finally, I'll choose this legend button. And sometimes it's when you press it, it's like you want to keep clicking on it because nothing's happening, but it's the same thing where you have to come down here and actually draw out the area you want it to fill. And then you can see all the things that we put on our map auto-populate here. So that's why it's important to rename using standard conventions there. And then finally, I'll use another text box to just include the date. And for these purposes, we're going to suggest you want to include the date that the map was created. So I'll put today's date on there, and then also the date the map was verified. So whenever you get that input back from your volunteer team and reintegrate that into the map, you're going to want to put that date onto the map. So I'll just jump over to this other layout that I made earlier that's just a bit neater in order to show you how to share. So once you create your map layout, you're going to want to share this with your volunteers so that they can go collect data using this map. So to do that, you're going to come up to the share button. If you click on that, there is an export layout option. Again, click on that. It'll bring up this export pane over here. It has a lot of different things in it that can be kind of intimidating, but we're only looking for 3 things. We want to make sure that the file type is a PDF. You can use this browse button right here in order to save it in the correct folder. That's correct, but I can go ahead and rename it to something a little bit more identifiable. And then I can hit save. And then the final thing, we don't have to look at anything in compression or anything in resolution, but we do want to make sure that PDF settings has export georeference information selected. And if it's not selected, and make sure you turn that on, because this is going to allow folks to use GPS data to find themselves on this map. And then you can just go ahead and hit export, and you can see that export is in progress. So that is the really quick and dirty of using GIS to create these maps. And the next step I'll go to is showing how to then collect data as a volunteer using Avenza Maps. So I'm going to be sharing on my phone screen, so you'll see me looking down here, but give me a moment and I'll start a broadcast. Wonderful. Okay, so this is what Avenza Maps looks like. There is a free, I'm sorry, my dog's crying. There's a free and a pro version. There's a little bit of a difference between the number of maps you can use, but I always recommend the free version. It's perfectly acceptable for most uses and definitely acceptable for this one. This is the My Maps frame. I can select the map that we just made. This is the Fleece Creek example layout. I'm sorry, my dog is really crying. I'm gonna let her out really quick.
That's cute. I thought it was my dog.
Yeah, she doesn't do that very often. So I just didn't want her to. Anyway, sorry, work from home. Yes, this is the map. This is what it looks like when you open the map in Avenza. And the first thing you'll notice is this gray crosshairs. This is how you can navigate around the map. This little dot in the middle shows the location. So what I'm going to show you how to do is there are two separate ways that you can add place marks to the map, and then two different ways where you can add a line. So we're going to talk through all of those different options. So the first one I'll talk about is adding a place mark to the map from an external location. So this would be if you're sitting at home or at work, or like me, on the other side of Hoplands, not on the map. And what you do is, if you already know, for example, let's say that we know this house 33019, we know that they have a water tank here outside their house, and we want to mark that on the map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in and try and get as close to that known location as possible. And once I'm there, I'll choose this little pin icon on the bottom left-hand side, and it'll bring up this option to add a place mark. Once I'm in this pane, I'm going to do three separate things. The first thing I'm going to do is change the title to say water tank, or whatever type of feature you are adding. The next thing is in this information box, you'll see these three dots, and it'll bring up all these different options for how you can mark this place on the map. And again, this is where the standard information comes into play. A water tank is always going to be a blue pin. So I'll select that one. And then finally, you can see the description is not set. So if I click on that, and then I can click edit, and I can provide any extra information about that I know. So if I know that it's say a 40,000 gallon tank, I might put that. And if I know the gallons per minute, I can put that information. Or if it has a 2-inch hookup, I can put that there as well. And once I feel like I've captured everything that I need to know about that place mark, I can go ahead and hit done, back, and then you're going to press the submit button in the top right hand corner. And there we go. Our location has been placed on the map. So the second way of doing this, and it's quite similar, but it's sometimes easier if you don't have known locations already. So if you're like physically walking or driving around your neighborhood and notice things like a standpipe or a hydrant or something like that, you can use your location to help make a mark on the map. So for example, let's say you're standing here at this house at 33221. And let's say that you know that these folks might need some help evacuating. So you're going to go stand up close to the house, you know, with permission and whatnot. But once you are in the location where you want to place the mark on the map, what you're going to do is press this little arrow in the bottom left-hand corner, and you can see it says locating, and then it's going to say not on map. There we go, because I'm not on Fleece Creek Road. But if I really were, it would zero in on my location, and then I would be centered in the crosshairs, and I would follow the exact same steps of clicking this place mark. And then again, I'm going to change the title to someone who might need an evacuation check. I can choose another place mark. For this case, we're going to choose a red pin, and then I can place a description in here and say whatever I would like to say. And oops, again, I'm going to say submit, and then you can see that placed a pin on the map. So that's sometimes easier when you have unknown locations, is to actually physically walk around and mark the locations like that. So the next thing that you might want to do is add a line to the map. And this is going to be the case if there's roads that are missing that you want to include but are not shown on this map. So one way to do it, and I'll show you how to do this, but it's a little bit unwieldy. It's not my recommended version, but again, if you're doing this from a third-party location and you know the location of a road that you want to add, you can do that by clicking on these three dots in the lower right-hand corner, and it brings up a bunch of options. You can say you want to draw and measure, and then you can see it says tap anywhere to add a vertex at the crosshair. So I'm going to navigate to this little bend in the road, and I'll tap. And you can see that I can start drawing a line. And every time I draw a line, it'll create a little vertex. And oops. As you can see, it's a little bit hard to use, even for me who has done this a couple of times. But once I am satisfied, I'll just press this check mark. And you can see I've now added a line. It's really important to then tap on that line and then tap on that information and follow the same process to name your road. So let's say we were trying to capture a 4x4 road there. I'll write that in. The style is fine then. And again, I can change the description to say only accessible, in dry weather, or whatever type of information you would like to provide. Same process, but you'll just want to be sure you add what that line is so that it's not just a random line on the road. But the easier way of doing this is to either physically walk or drive the road that you're trying to capture. And to do that, you're going to again click on the 3 dots, open that up. Instead of draw and measure, you'll choose record GPS tracks. It'll open up this little window, and then you can say start tracking. And what this does is it takes your GPS location every couple of seconds. And so if you walk or drive, it will capture your tracks. And this is actually interesting. You can see it says low GPS accuracy. This occurs when you're in a covered area. So if you live in a really forested area, your GPS accuracy might not be as good as if you live somewhere open. I live in a metal box, so sometimes my GPS accuracy is not great, but that's just something to note. And then once you're done, once you reach the end of the road, you can say stop tracking. Yes, please stop. And then again, you can see at the bottom, it says not on map because I am not on the map, but if I were, it would have recorded my tracks along the map. So those are kind of the main features you're going to use to collect data. Once you have added as much data as you want, you feel ready to give this back to the mapping team. You're going to want to export this layer back to them so they can add it onto the GPS map. To do that, you're going to choose this icon in the bottom right corner that has the pin and then the 3 lines next to it. So if I click on that, you can see I have my layer here. If I click on this eye over there, you can change the name of the layer. So if you have multiple volunteers collecting data, you might want to say this is Katie Smith's data. But other than that, there's nothing you need to do in this besides rename it if you would like to. However, to export data, you're going to go ahead and press this bottom right-hand icon that has a square and arrow leaving the square. If I click on that, I'll say export to others. You can see that the format is KML. That's the ideal format. There's a couple other ones, but you want to make sure it's in KML. And then the only other thing you want to check is that all features are selected. So you can see I have a check mark there. And with that, I can say export. They'll bring up some options. I'm going to choose my email. And then you can see that I can email this back to the mapping team and it has a KML file attached just there. So that's pretty much all the screen share that I have to do tonight. That's the bulk of it. So if we have more questions, now's the time.
Thank you, Katie. That was, again, a masterful job of getting through a whole bunch of data, but that's kind of the walkthrough. If you need to get through this process, you can come back to this and it will help guide you through. It looks like Jason's got a hand up.
Katie, can you jump into real quick just then how you would take that data once the mapping team receives it and put it back into the GIS maps?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to share this just to show how quick and easy it is, and I'll go into it since we have a little bit of time. Back in GIS, if I come back over to my map, there's this toolbox. Oops, I'm sorry. You can see over here on the right-hand side, I have my geoprocessing pane already open, which is why that didn't work. If I search KML file, you can see there's an option for KML to layer, and it is pretty amazing how easy it is. I would literally just navigate to where I saved that file in my hard drive, and I would save it to an output location. So I would just name the layer and then I hit run and it automatically populates onto my map. And then I can use the same process that I showed before to edit the symbology in order to make it mesh with what's already there.
Thank
you. Yeah. So that's kind of the benefit of using a software rather than doing it by hand, just because it is so quick to reintegrate that. Eric, I see you have your hand up too.
I was looking through for what the standards are as far as icons. So, for example, is there a standard size and color for a county road versus a private rock road versus a 4x4 forest road? Stuff like that. Is that on the Mendocino Fire Safe Mendocino website link somewhere? I couldn't find it, or is that somewhere else?
It should be up on our website.
I may have not found it.
It will be up. It should be up on that creating emergency responder maps. If it is not there, there is a chance that I might need to go back in and update it once more.
You want to go ahead and screen share the website page so people can see what's up there?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I may have just missed it. I was digging through it and I'm not
No,
seeing
it
but
absolutely might be an issue on my end. I've updated that page so many times, there's a chance that I hit save and rather than update. So let me make sure that I have the right screen share, which is not that. Okay, you can see where you'll find this is under the prepare your neighborhood, creating emergency response maps. Oh, yep. I'm sorry, that's my mistake. So over here is our guiding documents, and this is where you'll find basic instructions for volunteer training and Avenza. So all that I just showed in Avenza is also right here, and there should be a fourth one that has the standards. So I'm apologize about that. I thought that that was up there.
no, it's fine. It's fine. As long as we get it up there, we're good. I just
yeah, we do have some of those standards, are not universally applicable. So we kind of created them for our purposes here. There are standards of major roads and minor roads, so we'll use those. But some of them are just, you got to make a choice, I guess.
Yeah, and that's what's important. So when one of our local fire departments, volunteer fire departments, or CAL FIRE, pulls open Hopland's map versus Brook Trails map versus Covelo map, as long as they're all the same, that's what's important. Yeah.
So thank you for that reminder. I will get that up there tomorrow. It should be a quick process.
One more question so this looks like, and I was misunderstanding what the idea behind this was, but this looks like it's set up to create basically a set sized printable map that you could put in one of the boxes. Is there a plan to have all of those on one map so CAL FIRE can literally go to one link and see any neighborhood, any area that they want all together? Or is it just going to be a bunch of individually printable items?
Yeah, this is a kind of neighborhood by neighborhood project, and CAL FIRE is a whole other world. CAL FIRE has their whole own set of maps, and they're not going to use any of this stuff. This is going to be visiting fire districts, and if there was a way to share the stuff that CAL FIRE has with other organizations, that would be kind of a big shortcut. But my understanding is there really isn't. So.
Yeah, I've had that discussion with them. They said they're required to use their own maps. However, like Little Lake Fire Department was thrilled that we were creating our own map because they don't have the budget or supposedly the great maps that CAL FIRE does. They're based on something from 40, 50 years ago. And so when we were building our map, they were very excited about that. When I contacted CAL FIRE, they're like, yeah, that's nice, but we can't use it. So.
Yep.
The one thing I will say about that is what you can do with those QR codes is you can include all of the maps to one neighborhood on one QR code and make them, accessible in one place.
Yeah, that's a secondary thing is our just geographically, we're big enough that I don't think we can fit it all on one sheet of paper. So we're going to have to figure out a way to have multiple.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's apparently what Anderson Valley does, is they'll have like one overview map, but then behind it, close-ups of segments all in the box. So you can sort of flip through depending on where you're going. But it's going to
And
depend
like
on
the old Thompson maps had the reference at the end of each map, at each edge, the north edge, the south edge of what the next map over was. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, what we
Am
have
I
right
dating
now is kind
myself
of
here?
is kind of a master one that has a grid, and then, you know, showing the different quadrants, and then a zoomed in version of each quadrant. So you can orient that way, is the current method.
Okay, and this is Anderson Valley, is that, can we take a look at that one? Is that posted on there?
This was actually what I was referring to was from McNabb Ranch, because it's also pretty large. There's a larger one, and those should be up on the web. The most recent versions should be up there for you to take a look at the way the grid system works out. Those aren't quite finalized, so there will be updates still coming. So if you see, I'll try and add the date when I update the maps. So if you want to check back, we'll keep updating those as they come.
Yeah. And interesting, I mean, Elk and Anderson
Well, that's a
Valley
great
have done
thing
their
about
own thing.
Great City
They're,
Game.
oops, sorry.
Oh, so Anderson Valley did it differently than McNabb?
Well, I mean, they've done their own thing and it's up, and they've got them in the fire station, and they've got them in Knox boxes out in the neighborhoods already. So it's deployed and functioning there. They haven't integrated, we haven't even talked about integrating their maps onto our website with all the other maps that other districts do. I mean, we're just kind of housing them. So we should probably reach out and offer that if they want to put a QR code on there, we could house them as well. But we're just kind of going forward at this point. We haven't reached back to what they've done and tried to bring it into this process. And we've got somebody else with their hand up. Valdic. Hopefully I said.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for putting on this program. It's pretty interesting. I have 230 acres of forested property above Anderson Valley, looking down from Cloud Ridge Road. And I've done forest management work up there. I wasn't sure if people are marking up shaded fuel break type activity in case that's helpful.
You know, that is yet a whole nother project that's underway. But in terms of, and this is more for knowing where neighborhoods and infrastructures are. So shaded fuel breaks really wouldn't make it into this kind of map. There is a whole other process going on to come up with kind of terrain and mapping that brings in LiDAR data and brings in contours and ridges that fire departments and others can use to look at to figure out where they should let things burn and where they need to get in and stop things and where it makes sense to put the next break in and where it makes sense to connect existing breaks. And that's a whole other separate huge process that's just kind of getting underway. There's a process called pods that Sonoma and Humboldt are implementing that does that. And our CAL FIRE folks have a whole different program that they're just rolling out that's doing that in Mendocino County. And we're just starting the discussion about how to maybe bring that stuff together. So.
Okay. And if someone is working on like these management teams, is there a way to find out if there's a local management team already existing in my area or something like that?
Like a mapping team?
Yeah, I'm sorry, mapping team.
Yeah, I mean, in our imaginings, it's going to be driven by your local neighborhood fire safe council largely. So probably get in touch there and see if they've already started the process.
Yep, and you can always check with us. We'll probably know if anything's
Sure.
going on, or we can connect you with the closest neighborhood fire safe council.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Eric, your hand is still up. Do you have other things or?
Nope, I will take it down.
Okay.
Anyone else have questions at this point?
Julia, I see your hand went up.
Hi, yeah, thank you for putting this on. It's been really helpful, and thanks for having me, your neighbor up here in Humboldt County. I'm wondering if you all are integrating this project with any county-wide evacuation planning efforts, or at this point, is it just kind of a localized neighborhood by neighborhood kind of effort?
At this point, it's localized neighborhood by neighborhood, although Mendocino County OES attended the prior version of this. So we do coordinate with them a lot, and we're actually coordinating with them to help get a new evacuation software, or help find funding for that. So
Would that be Zone Haven?
yep, exactly.
Okay, yeah, I asked because Humboldt is just rolling out Zone Haven now, and we have a lot of probably the similar issues with roads not being correct in our records, and so that has a nexus with the evacuation planning. So it seems like a process like what you've described this evening would be helpful for us up here as well.
Yeah, that's a good one down the road. You know, I think you guys as well. We just brought on a county coordinator that literally started last week here, whose job for the next year and X months is going to be to find the places where we can do a better job of making our projects complement each other, and not overlap, and finding ways to sort of cooperate and share resources between departments more, and finding better ways to sort of prioritize that whole mass of stuff. So, I mean, what you're pointing out is yet another one of the places where we need more coordination.
Of course, yes. We're pleased to be recipients of that same grant. So looking forward to working with Emily on that as well. So
Cool.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other
Anyone, we are
questions?
pretty much dead on time, which is always kind of sweet. Any last minute questions? And we can also, if anybody's got more in-depth questions, we can, well, I shouldn't speak for Katie, but I'm assuming we could twist her arm to stay for a few more minutes.
Definitely. And I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat as well if anything comes up later that you guys want to get in touch about.
All right, thank you very much, Katie. This is great.
Yeah, thanks for joining on this Wednesday evening.
There you go. Yep. Thank you, everybody, for taking your time. Shows a lot of commitment. If you have follow-up questions, we're around, so don't be shy. If you get a chance, if you have comments on the, if you end up looking through our webpage with this and there are ways you think we can improve that, don't be shy about sharing that either. All right.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody. We're going to call it a night.
Thank you
Bye,
all.
everybody.
Right. Bye all.